Hello, welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stover. My guest today is a communicator and an academic. Let's welcome Gerard Igyor, Professor of Communications at Millersville University of Pennsylvania in the United States of America. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Right. Professor Igyor went into mainstream teaching in 1993 at the Temple University in Philadelphia, and that was after completing his PhD in telecommunications. But before his sojourn to the United States, he had spent some time in the broadcasting industry, specifically as a staff of the News and Current Affairs Department of the Nigerian Television Authority, Makudi. That was in the late 70s, somewhere between 78 and 79. So we can say to you, welcome back home.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Professor Igyor, to kickstart this discussion, you have been talking about public broadcasting, financing content, and the background to this easily is that Nigeria is moving towards digitization, and NTA, for instance, is considered a public broadcaster. Now, you have concerns about financing content and public broadcasting, especially in Nigeria. And as we move towards digitization, a question you have raised at one point in time is the perception of the public broadcasting service in Africa. Here in Nigeria, it is considered that public broadcasting is modeled after the British system. But you don't seem to agree with that, do you?
No. BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, which is an act of a charter, starting way back in 1926, had a concept, it's a philosophy also, that as a public broadcaster, you are not for profit. You are first to inform before entertainment. Information, news, and entertainment. It was for the British people to be entertained about British art, British literature, British music, and other British cultural artifacts. And they could go anywhere that was British, and you know, then the sun never sets on the empire. And so even if they had a Nigerian content, it was considered British because of the empire. Right. Let's then fast forward it. When radio and television came to Nigeria, we started having the concept of that commercialism, which the BBC, and by design, moved away. It was not even considered. They knew that it was a public service broadcasting facility, first radio and then television, that there should be no commercials on it.
But easily the argument that's put forward around here was before deregulation, for instance, the government-owned media served a role akin to that of a public service because it was wholly and fully funded by the government.
Yes.
And so that was seen as a public service of sorts.
But you had that commercialism attached to it directly. You could have sold your programs, sure, after you have shown it, but not to stop the program, bring your advertising messages, and then go back to it. Or at certain periods, stop the program, sell the audiences to the advertisers. The BBC never had that concept. They still don't have it, except when you go online, which is completely different thing, which we will go into when we start talking about digitization.
So we can safely consider that our model is not necessarily British, but
it was actually a quasi-American.
all right.
Because the Paul Dolan associate that advised the Western government in setting up the radio and television, radio and first television in Africa as an educational but also a commercial television and radio broadcasting. Did you see that? Quite separate. The philosophy of public broadcasting was lost there immediately when that commercial interest was brought in. And it is also anathema. How can you have educational and then commercial broadcasting?
You see this as a conflict of
Yes, right from the beginning. And you know the federal government, I'm talking about from pre-independence to independence, was really not so much into it, into broadcasting as such.
Well, we could say the commercial content,
Yeah.
we could describe it as minimal, considering the greater needs of public service, which dealt with day-to-day of serving as a feedback mechanism for the government and getting in, and knowing the thinking of the people they governed. We could say that was more overriding, or has been more overriding, than the commercial content.
That is a major problem. You say it's a minimal problem. And we carry that concept in every aspect of our lives. You see, we say that this person has only stolen 1 million. It's small money. No, don't talk about it. And then it goes bigger, 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 bigger. We should never have gone into it in the first. If it is a public service broadcasting system we were setting up, because it is a philosophy that you will not sell your listeners and audiences to the market, to the advertiser. But we were selling our audiences and our listeners for commercial purposes. And it befit everything about the philosophy of public broadcasting.
All right then, Prof. So would you now suggest a better system of funding? Now we're talking about this in some detail because you have been concerned about funding content,
Yes.
public broadcasting in Africa. So how else would you raise much needed funding for the broadcasting organizations? Because, for instance, in Nigeria, as a clear example, no one pays to watch terrestrial TV. You just buy your TV, plug in, and that's it. And no one collects any fees for that. The stations are deprived of much needed revenue, which is, of course, the reverse in, say, for instance, the UK,
Yes.
the BBC.
If you are a student of broadcasting in Nigeria here, I don't know, the other day I heard history will be reintroduced in schools, and I didn't know when history disappeared, but you will read that part of the funding for public broadcasting was to come from license fee to supplement government budget process for the broadcasting. You see, it did not mention anything about part of it should be gotten from selling our audiences
All right.
to the advertisers.
Okay. But even those license fees you talked about, which were mainly collected by local governments,
Yes.
they went to local government coffers, and not a dime of it went to the broadcasting organizations.
It was an error right from the beginning. The broadcaster is not getting his license or her license from the local government. And as a matter of fact, in terrestrial broadcasting, actually, before then, the broadcaster never dug streets that would say belong to the local governments. You see. So, of what purpose? What was the reason behind that the local government should collect that money? Maybe they said they have tax collectors, all right? But in Britain, who was collecting it? Was the post office. We already had a post office before Nigeria became independent. We had post offices here. So then, go ahead and pay your set fee at the post office, and then the post office will deduct its own administrative portion of it and turn it over to an organization that is responsible to channel it back to where it should have gotten in the first place.
All right. Well, today we're moving to digitization.
Yes.
And one of the biggest challenges in broadcasting today is funding, content and funding. And as some would say, one to a large extent is dependent on the other. If you don't have adequate funding, then it supposes that your content may not be as qualitative as you desire it to be. Now, how do we get out of this situation?
Let's go back to the good old days again, when even the BBC showed content produced wholly by NTA or Federal Radio Corporation when they would share it. I know Canadian Broadcasting Corporation got Nigerian programs to show because they were of high quality. Okay? We all knew how this quality programming was coming about. It was because of the funding from the government that had this public broadcasting system. So the question should be, what happened? Why have you abandoned your own child, but you're still expecting this child to be of good behavior, to produce quality content?
All right.
It cannot happen. And in the present age of digitization, it cannot happen. You cannot ask a public broadcaster to go where every other private broadcaster is getting their money from through advertising. The private broadcaster goes into program production with a private studio, right? When American Broadcasting Company, ABC, National Broadcasting Company, NBC, Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS in America, when their programs are produced, they pay just not wholly for it to the studio that produced this high quality content for either ABC, NBC, or CBS. And ABC, CBS, NBC, they have two plays. They will do the first run and the second run. And that program goes right back to its owner, the studio. You see? The initial cost of the program was already paid by these networks, these private networks. Then, after the 2 runs on their own network, it reverts back to the studio. Then the studio will go selling it on syndication, where they will make billions and billions of money. You see? And depending on how the contract was signed, ABC will not get any cut from it, because the contract has already been met with you. We produce it for you first, and you ran it twice. You also made your money. If you were not making money on it because there were fewer listeners or viewers, the show is cancelled. You see? So you go back to the drawing board to look for a quality content. But the ones that made it, in the end, turned out to have made billions of dollars, because then they will sell first in the United States to any local broadcaster. Then it goes on the international market. And that is where we also got our own American programs. Even if we said it was only $10 then, but it's a $10 that studio never had. And it's $10 that was taken from a Nigerian producer. Then it was either Federal Radio Corporation producer or Nigerian Television Authority producer.
Well, Prof, you yourself asked the question, what happened to the quality programs that broadcasting organizations churned out in the past? Why is it now so difficult to get those quality programs out anymore? Is it just a straight matter of funding? Because people would say to you, times have changed. The budget you used to produce a 30-minute documentary some 25 years ago would be more than triple the amount today if you were to do the same documentary.
At no time did we think or sat back and said that news, information were for free. These are commodities. It was a conscious effort that the Nigerian government made to establish a public broadcasting service. And therefore, that concept is today more important than ever.
Right.
And therefore, whatever it is, in my paper, the last part of it, I said that public broadcasting should be founded just like you found Nigeria Police, Nigerian Armed Forces. Because information is power. What the public broadcasting, and look, the concept establishing this system is very, very laudable. Very, very laudable. It is only the public broadcaster that can unite this country.
All right.
And they have been doing it.
But then therein lies the challenge, Prof. You believe it should be fully funded and properly
100%.
100%.
Without interference.
Right. So therein lies the problem. A, 100% funded.
Yes.
Without interference.
We are in a democracy.
So the concept of who pays the piper dictates the tune doesn't apply here. Now, can that seriously be adhered to in a country like Nigeria, for instance?
It can be seriously adhered to in a country like Nigeria.
Okay, that's
if we know what we want the service to do.
Okay, that's one aspect of it.
Yes.
A second aspect is that with government revenues dwindling by the day, the argument is not much can be found for broadcasting, and therefore they are left to their own devices to raise funding.
And that is where I totally disagree. You cannot dwindle the importance of broadcasting just because of the paucity of funds. You cannot do that. It is a necessity. Let's say so. There is no public broadcasting. Who and how is the government going to communicate with the people? Who is going to explain the government policies to the people? Who is also going to be a watchdog? Nigeria is a democracy, and we're not going back to any other system. It will be democracy, democracy, democracy. We're not going back. And therefore, we cannot leave one of the things that will make Nigeria a great democracy behind, because we no longer have the funds. We do. You have to.
All right. How do you respond to the argument that even if the government were to have the funds to properly and adequately fund the public broadcaster,
yes,
how can you guarantee non-interference? Because all too often government would say, well, we put in the money, but then we can control how it is expended and what it's expended on.
The government is our government, the government of the people, for the people, right? The government should not be like that spoiled child that in the whole village was the only one that could bring the ball to the field. And anytime he was attacked, he would just take his ball, put it in his arm and go away. Because I was there. He should not be acting like a spoiled child. This was also one of the points I made during the conference, Africa's 26. I said, don't bring me into government, the debate on government interference. That normally, and it shouldn't be a problem with Nigeria either. Nigeria should not be an exception. BBC has not had it easy with the government neither. Okay? But when there is a problem, when the government, various governments have problems with BBC, BBC has a board of governors. They are appointed by the government. And this board of governors have stood up to the government and say, hey, there is nothing wrong here. You are overbearing. You chose us to oversee this institution for the people and for you. And you are now coming directly into the job that you have given us to do. So can you back off? So why, and I believe that the public broadcasting, the NTA and FRCN, they have boards.
Appointed by the government.
By the government.
Right.
So why can't these good Nigerians that have been entrusted to oversee this organization stand up for them? And remember, these are no ordinary Nigerians. There are people that have come from, they have people behind them who can vote. And we are representing the people for you. So please, If there is an obvious wrong, let us correct it. Not you bring in the stick and say, I'm withdrawing my funding.
Okay, Prof, we'll take a, we'll shift a little from that and look at another aspect. Hopefully, we'll come back to this issue of control. But let's look at training, which is an integral part of the development of any organ.
Yes.
Over the years, you'd find that the old broadcasters had access to, at least at that time, the best of training facilities, which they took advantage of. Today, you have many more people who are well educated and who have broadened the scope of knowledge. Yet, it would seem that there is still that element of poor training and response to the modern challenges of broadcasting. What do you think is responsible for that?
This is another area that it is very shameful. When Nigeria was a young nation, this country trained its citizens, particularly in the core areas of engineering and broadcasting as a whole. Almost close to 70–80% when you would go to a television station, you'll be talking to staff that have been trained overseas, sent on courses that were very, very cogent, very important to the development of the industry. In all the private broadcasting houses here, you will go, you'll find engineers that have been trained by the government. You will find producers that were sent overseas, be they in radio or in television. Even camera persons were sent on training. It was okay when we started having FRC in school, in that television college and that. I didn't know that these were coming to then replace all other overseas training, making us an island. You cannot competitively develop in this profession of broadcasting if everything is in-house. We don't manufacture cameras. But when we were sending personalities like Engineer Wakombo, Engineer Mana to Japan and all these other countries, it was not for them to just go sightseeing. Not that there is anything wrong going sightseeing. But they went straight where the equipment was coming from. And our engineers could bring a dead camera to life. You see?
Well, speaking of which, you would say, well, that kind of funding is no longer available. So most organizations say they would make do with local training. Do you think that we are challenging that?
It is good to have local institutions for training. But if there comes a time, and that time is always there, that your staff also be competing on the world stage.
Well, I suppose the question again would be, have we developed those institutions, high quality institutions that...
That is another point. Wow. That is another point. I don't know the condition of these institutions. I have never been to one, unfortunately. I should. But is something like in the universities, then I'm not happy. We're still training students who will have a BSc in mass communication that would not have seen a camera. It's improving though. It's improving. But seeing it is not the same as touching it. You see that? I did a diploma in television and motion pictures. The very first day I touched the camera, I took it out in London. I took it out. I shot movies with it. I sat down, we were taught how to write scripts, or from an idea to the finished product. There is no Nigerian student who graduates from a Nigerian university today that can take a camera, go and shoot a movie and finish and bring it. No. Why? Because the facilities are not there. But we have universities. So if it is that same happening, then there should be more of those overseas training than ever.
All right. There are so many aspects to what we're discussing on this program. Another is the feeling in some quarters that the traditional media, broadcasting as we know it, is fast taking a second place because of the new media and the fact that someone once predicted that in the very near future, newspapers, radio and television would take a backstage. They would be on their way to being obsolete because of the new media and the internet. You think that the traditional media still has a place?
Traditional broadcasting, radio and television, it's not going away. Television, for example, was a computer the very first time it came up. All right? So that people in television, look, your switchboard is a computer. So if anybody is coming to frighten you, you have seen a computer before other Nigerians even heard about it. Okay? The internet, the social media, right? My wristwatch, I can watch TV here, but it's not the same as somebody who stays at home and is watching us on television. Just before I came on this conference, there was a study done about the effects of new media on television. And I'm not saying that it does not have an effect. It does have a disruptive effect. Disruptive.
Right. You call that a disruptive?
Yes, it's disruptive.
Let's explore this further.
Yes, but except if those of you who are in broadcasting would say, well, we have given up. Let social media take over. You still have about, this is in America, 50-something% still watching television. You see? Cable television is about 68% penetration. New media is coming up, mostly with the youth. But then the point of discussion, they'll tell you, did you watch the debate? Yeah, I did. I tried to watch it on YouTube. It was boring. I left. No, I watched it on ABC. I watched it on Fox. And it was different. They say, really? They say, look, if you watch it on a larger screen, it's different than this. And for serious information, right, where do they turn again? If something is happening, the social media will be the first to bring it up, but you also have your leg on there. Don't you have a spot on social media?
Right.
You should have an executive director in charge of that section with his or her own staff. They will take news from you, put it on there. If there is a question on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, the personnel that is on the social media will handle it. Take care of it immediately. So don't let them beat you on your turf. They are coming in on our turf, and we have to beat them there. Be there. Nothing stops NTA from going on that superhighway and actually go with a very big outside broadcast van driving on that information superhighway, so that the other ones will say, look, be careful with that van, it might crush you. Don't be afraid of it, Siri. NTA should also be on there.
All right, Prof.
Don't be a blogger, be a broadcaster. You see, social media is not broadcasting.
Right. Okay, Prof. Still to do with the digitization.
Yes.
Nigeria is set for that, and a lot of people have understandably been apprehensive about the effects of it, seeing that the terrestrial broadcasting, which they have been used to, people resist change. It's not exactly going to be the same, and some have said this would even improve the quality of content and would even provide an avenue for more jobs.
Exactly. Digitization, for immediate result, is that NTA had Channel 10. Channel 10 now, we had only one channel. That Channel 10 now would have 5 to 6 channels. Okay? And therefore, how is NTA going to become a real public broadcaster? NTA could have one channel for NTA in TV,
Right.
NTA in Angas.
Just like we do have right now, because
Yes,
right
but
now,
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to
Right.
that. Did you notice how I started?
Right.
All right. It's not NTA Hausa, NTA Yoruba, NTA that. I'm saying NTA TV,
Right.
NTA Jukum,
Okay.
NTA Idoma.
Smaller.
You see? No, they're not small. It is this grouping that has made this nation great.
All right. In
You
other
see?
words, Prof, while, of course, right now you do have those channels that cater to the 3 major language areas.
That is my problem. I don't want to hear that major.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to hear that major.
Okay. All right.
Sure. Don't let me go outside broadcasting now. You and I were very young during the war in Nigeria.
Right.
But I knew one thing. Each time soldiers were passing, you had to pass the Tiv area and the Doma area to go to the war front. Most of them were speaking our language. Where were these major groups? So now it's time to eat. We're not the small, you call them small group. They're not small. They're the ones that really stood that this country be one.
Okay.
And when you start building the nation, you forget about them.
Okay. All right. As you say, we'll stick to,
Yes.
to broadcasting.
Yeah.
Okay. Still on content.
But then,
right.
now that you have more channels,
Right.
you have more programs that you couldn't produce quality production that NTA was known for. You couldn't produce because you only had one channel. Now you have 7 channels available to you. Then go ahead. And I'm not leaving who has NTA. NTA is owned by the people of Nigeria.
You would rather say the people and not the government.
Yes, the government is just a trust,
Okay.
all right? But it is Nigerian Television Authority. Have you forgotten? Nigerian Television Authority. And Nigerians have very high taste. Our content today should not, and under any reasons or why, don't give me a why, that we cannot produce quality programs that NTA produce and we enjoy them.
Okay.
All right. In the digital age, could you imagine if Peter Igyor had to came back now and started producing another of those programs, Cockroach at Dawn? When you see it on digital television, you take a deep breath.
All right.
Because of the picture quality of the technology that we're talking about in digital form. That music, you will hear it will sound different, more appealing. Even if you have not danced in your life, you will shake your head and tap your foot down.
So that would see as some of the benefits of digitization.
Yes.
Improved technology has
Yes.
helped to make things that better. for us.
And we cannot say we have to. We must go digital. It is the world's law, ITU, through ITU, that we have to move. And even, okay, so let's do a little bit of economics here. In the United States, when we move from the analog to digital, you know, and the money is still coming, billions and billions of dollars, when the old frequency that you were using turn around and to be sold to telecommunication company. Money. So invest that money where it's coming from. It's going to happen in this country too. The federal government is going. Once we vacate the analog system, they're not going to throw it away. It will be used in other things.
Now, Prof, there's an argument which has been raised in certain quarters. I'd like you to respond to that. And that easily is going back to the issue of ownership of public broadcasters. That there should be full commercialization. In fact, let all companies go out there in the market and survive. That's been put forward, and those who propose that say it will help remove the problem of ownership and tendency of dictating what goes on here. Do you really need a public broadcaster in this age Because some would say there was a purpose in the past. It was mainly propaganda.
No. The public broadcasting is as important today as it was when the concept was created. Show me one country in the world that does not have a public broadcasting. One. None. Every year, whenever there is an economic meltdown in the United States, people in Congress start talking about, the federal government shouldn't be funding projects like CPC, that is Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and all that, and that, and that, and that. In the end, they will still appropriate money. Because there are some diehards in right-thinking people in the American Congress and in the states houses or assemblies who will say, you can't do that. Even if it is 2% of Americans that are watching that, they are Americans. And the programs that the public broadcaster is producing, these commercial entities cannot go into it. They are looking for numbers. A private broadcaster cannot replicate, cannot even say, let me be doing part public broadcasting job and part commercial job. No. It has never happened in any world. Public broadcasting was even given a plot in the graveyard in America. They thought it would die. It's not there. It will not go there. It will stay and reinvent itself. But look, we're joking with the quality of the issue of quality programming. Quality programming. Or the few private television stations we have here, don't they do news? They do news. If they want to show that they can do a better job, schedule your news at 9 o'clock in Nigeria and compete with the leader that has in his name or her name through that fairness, trust, believability, that credibility. And that is what is in that brand. That what I'm going to hear will be very close to what it is. If it is not what it is, it will be very close. Nigeria is not ready for all commercial television, radio, broadcasting. We have seen what happened in the Edo election. Didn't somebody turn all his station over to the party that he belonged to? That is not what public broadcasting would. Even if you have a dictator, they would say, look, we are for the people. Look, somebody should tell these guys it's too much.
All right. Well, as we begin to wind down, Professor Igyor, we move towards digitization, and it's virtually around the corner. 2017 is the deadline. What, in your opinion, is the best way Nigeria can go about it and be part of the global system?
We're on one, is that?
Yes.
Okay. Drop the PROF. Call me Gerard or Igyor, right? then we will come down and we'll discuss this issue of Nigeria being behind. America went through the same thing, really. But it came to a point where it was becoming a constitutional issue.
Right.
And Congress, they told Obama, it's not because it's you or anything. If you come back to us to extend this, we are not going to do it. And you will have a constitutional crisis on your hands. We cannot be shifting dates for this. America is #1 country in the world technologically, and you're telling us that we pass a law. We gave it to you, the executive, to go and even made money available to you. Not just once. Where is the money? And you're coming to tell us that we need more time. This is the last time we're extending that deadline. It was a constitutional issue. Do we have a law in Nigeria? Every time they say the government has said June 16, July that, it's just a pronouncement. It's not backed by any law. If it is backed by a law, a government cannot willingly just be breaking the law. It's written, it's a constitutional thing. We don't have that. The very first time we had Africans, this issue came about, I said, look, Nigeria is not going to do it. They said I was just being negative. I said, no, I'm not. I said, look at all the countries that have gone digital. It has gone through their legislature to the executive. We have not done that.
Yeah, but this time around, government has expressed its commitment to meeting that deadline, and steps have been taken.
Steps
to consolidate.
Steps will always be taken.
All right.
But send a bill to the National Assembly.
Okay, you think this should also be backed by
yes,
law,
let it be backed by law.
All right.
This is no joke. We're talking about billions of naira here. How are you going to spend money? Or you say you will spend it through Minister of Information. No. Set-top box. I also got a set-top box. I got 2 from money that was budgeted by Congress. It was meant to take care of poor Americans. But I put myself in there and I went.
Okay.
And got 2.
All right. It's been interesting talking to you. And just by the way, to mention that Professor Igyor came in to be a resource person to deliver a paper at the last Africast summit, which held in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And so for the past 50 or so minutes, we've been talking about broadcasting, and we have enjoyed sharing your views on certain aspects, particularly the one to deal with public broadcasting. And we'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Digitization, we cannot run away from it. The government knows it is important.
All right.
Otherwise, we will be breaking international protocols.
Right. Okay.
And I'm glad that Nigeria is heading that way.
Okay. So thank you once more.
Thanks.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll reach you again on NTA One-on-One. I am Cyril Stober. Bye for now.